Okay, Joe's here, so we can start. Okay, everybody, let's grab a seat, please. Gentlemen, you want to grab a seat, please?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So, first thing I want to do is I want to apologize to you guys because I was so confused last week. I really was. I was talking to you guys, reading the book, and every time I looked in the book, I went, "Oh, we just did that, didn't we?" I was thinking about doing the 3 day workshop in Scotland. I know I just did it, but I didn't think I thought I was doing it here, but it was something over there. So I was a I was a little please yeah. Uh, so I was a little discombobulated last week.
Hey, if that's the worst thing that happened this week, we're gonna be okay.
Yeah. So I want to make sure that we first, before we continue on, I didn't. Is there any questions on step two and the exercise that we're doing on step two? Does anybody need to talk about that? Okay, everybody's okay with that, right? Putting down what you think and believe about God, and then changing that, taking out the negatives, putting in the positive stuff, and then doing the fake it till you make it prayer. Thank you. Okay. Well, let's go over. Let's just start off then on page 59. And again, I might go over some stuff that we touched last week, but again, I was just so confused.
Use it.
So step three, made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood Him. So there's 5 parts to this step, and I'm not sure if we did this or I did it in Scotland. Okay, so all right. So, so there's 5 parts to the third step. Okay, the first part is made a decision. So a decision would be part one of step three. And what does that mean? Made a decision. Well, a decision implies further action. In other words, if I decide to drive to New York and I don't get in my car and head east, it's just another thought. It's just another resolution, right? It's not a decision. A decision implies further action. So I need to get in my car and head east if I'm driving to New York, right? So over here, we made a decision. So we're talking about that implies further action. We're going to get to that. Then to turn our will, and our will is our thinking, okay? But it's our thinking on 3 planes: past, present, and future. And this is very important that you understand this. Okay, so when we talk about our will, it's our thinking. It's everything that I wish I did, prefer to be doing, and hope I'll do. I'll say that again so you can write it down. It's everything I wish I did, prefer to be doing, and hope I'll do. That's past, present, and future with my thinking. If you look at that, what, Don? Everything I wish I did, prefer to be doing, and hope I'll do. So there, if you look at those 3 things, they're all of the mind. Everything I wish I did means I didn't do it, I did something else. Everything I prefer to be doing means I'm not doing it, I'm doing something different. And hope I'll do. They're all of the mind. Okay, because the will is the thinking. And it's the thinking in 3 dimensions: past, present, and future. And then it says, and our lives. And our lives is the action. Our lives represent the action. Okay. Also on 3 dimensions: past, present, and future. It's everything I have done, am doing, and will do. I'll say that again. It's everything I have done, am doing, and will do. Now, if you look at those 3 statements, they're all of action. It's everything I have done. That means I took some action there. Am doing, that means there's action involved, and will do. Okay? So our will in our lives is our thinking and our actions. And just take a minute to talk about the word lives, plural, is not by mistake. Okay? He could have very well, if he wanted to say life, he could have very well said, turn our will and our life over to the care of God. He did not say that. He chose the word lives, plural. And the reason for that is we all have different facets of our life. I have the life of a father, a grandfather. I have a life of a businessman. I have a life in a friend. I have a life of recovering alcoholic. I have all different areas of my life, and that's what compensates the word lives, all of it. Okay. So decision is the first part. Will, the thinking is our second part. Lives is action is the third part. Turn our will and our lives over to the care. That little 34 letter word. Care. That's the fourth part. To me, that's probably the most important part of step 3. The care. Turn it over to the care of God. Because we get that mixed up a lot. We think that we're talking about giving God our lives. When God wants my life, I'll know about it.
Probably not.
Well, yeah,
We will.
for a fraction of a second, I'll know about it. I'll be gone. But and I use the example all the time of I drive a Cadillac, and when there's something the matter with my car, I take it to the Cadillac dealership. I don't take it to the Kia dealership because who better to fix my car than the maker, Cadillac place, right? And the same thing applies in my life. When there's something the matter with my life, I take it to my maker. Who better than my maker to take it to? I take it to God. But just like I drop my car off at the Cadillac dealership, I don't give them my car. It's still my car. So when I go to God, I don't give my life to God. I turn over my thoughts and my actions to the care of God. That's what I'm doing when I go to God in this instance. Does that make sense to you? So the care of God, and then it says of God as we understood him. And the word understood is past tense. And the reason that it's past tense, again, that's not by mistake. He could have easily said understand him. He did not. He wrote understood him because the understanding of God takes place before this third step. The search for God, we went over that, begins in step 2. We found that when we were going over step 2. I pointed that out to you. The search for God begins in step 2. So, and we don't have to reinvent the wheel. You know, the book tells us that no matter how inadequate our understanding of God is, it's good enough to begin. And so we begin from wherever we're at. And now we get to the third step, and the understanding of God has already taken place in the second step. So therefore, he uses the past tense and he says, understood. Now, the most important thing, I think, about, and I think I said this to you before, every step sets us up for the next step. I tell you in step 2, you got to get an understanding of God that works for you, and you have to be comfortable with that. Remember? Because if you're not comfortable with that, there's no way you could take a third step. How could you possibly turn your will and your life over to the care of a God that you're afraid of or that you have negative things about? You have to be comfortable with this God. And the third step is setting us up to do a fourth step. A lot of people will talk about steps 4 and 5 go together. You hear that all the time. in meetings. Steps 4 and 5 go together. Actually, they don't. Actually, steps 3 and 4 go together. Go to page 64 in your book. Top of the page before the first paragraph. It says, though our decision, step 3, top of the page, though our decision was a vital and crucial step, it could have little permanent effect unless at once followed by a strenuous effort to face and be rid of the things in ourselves which have been blocking us. Our liquor was but a symptom, so we had to get down to causes and conditions. So I think I shared this with you. The steps do not address symptoms. The steps do not address symptoms. The steps address the problem. Alcohol is but a symptom. The steps don't address alcohol. Step 1 does. The rest of them do not. So, step 3 is a vital and crucial step, but it can have little permanent effect unless at once followed by a strenuous effort to face and be rid of the things in ourselves which had been blocking us. So, what does that mean? Our decision, that's the third step, is a vital and crucial step, but it could have little permanent effect unless at once followed by a step 4. So what the book is saying to us is that we do the third step and then we immediately start writing on the fourth step. So 3 and 4 go together, not 4 and 5. I'm not saying that 4 and 5 don't have anything to do with each other. Of course they do. But it's not like people share in the rooms how 4 and 5 go together. It's 3 and 4 to go together. That's according to our literature. Now, something interesting. On page 60 and 61, it describes our behavior. And on 62, it labels it. So on 60 and 61, it talks about selfishness, self-centeredness, right? And it describes our behavior. And on 62, it puts a label on it. Selfishness, self-centeredness. That we think is the root of our trouble. So all the things that page 60 and 61 is describing is selfishness and self-centeredness. And remember when we did the exercise with the chair, I think it was Michelle that we lifted in the chair, right? And we talked about how important it is to have an open mind and to believe, right? Because those are people that, and I've done this is the 30th year I'm doing this study. And I can tell you there's been lots of people with many years of sobriety that wouldn't believe that we lifted her up or lifted whoever it was that year. And those people, as far as I'm concerned, could never do this step, this third step. Because they have to prove that God exists to them. So they're closed-minded. All right, so that's the 5 points of the third step, okay? Now let's go over to page 60. Did we talk about the 3 pertinent ideas? Step 1, step 2, step 2, right? Okay. Then it says being convinced we're at step 3. And then 2 pages over, it again says, 3 pages over, we're now at step 3, right? And I think we talked about this last week, right? Okay. So the first requirement is that we be convinced that any life run on self-will could hardly be a success. I have never met anybody yet, myself included, in recovery that at this point in their program of recovery have been convinced that any life run on self-will could hardly be a success. But the book is telling us this is the first requirement. Now, I believe that running my life on self-will is not successful, but I wasn't convinced Because I always thought that there's something left in this bag of trick of mine that I could pull out and make work. Right? And so the rest of this page and the whole next page is talking about ways that we are running our lives on self-will and how we dominate people. Right? Because we control people through dominance, whether it's a physical dominance or a dependence on people, right? Dependence on people is control also. That's dominating people. Okay, then we get to page 62. And it puts the label on what our problem is. Selfishness, self-centeredness. That we think is the root of our troubles. Driven by 100 forms of fear, self-delusion, self-seeking, and self-pity, we step on the toes of our fellows and they retaliate. Sometimes they hurt us, seemingly without provocation, but we inevitably find that sometime in the past we made decisions based on self, which later put us in a position to be hurt. This is so true. See, because any person that is driven by all kinds of fears like we are, and to us, I think emotions and stuff, you take an alcoholic or an addict and multiply emotions by 10, and that's what we are. More so than a normal person. Okay? That's my own opinion, but I find it to be pretty true. So what happens is, if I have all of these fears, then I'm always in the constant frame of mind that I'm going to lose something that I think I have. I'm not going to get something that I think I deserve. Or what are you going to do when you find out about what I did? Those are the three biggest fears people like us, or even normal people have, but us to the 10th degree, of course. So if I'm living like that, and this is in my head, all of these fears, what are you going to do when you find out? Or I can't lose what I think I got here, or I'm not going to get what I think I need. If I'm living like that, I'm always going to take a shortcut to get what I need or get what I want. And I don't know if you know what a shortcut is, but a shortcut is the quickest way to get someplace you didn't want to go.
Yeah.
Those of us that remember before GPSs were out, right, and we're driving, we're always getting lost because I knew a shortcut. So the idea then that what happens, this is the kind of way it plays out for me, and it's probably the same for you, but I'm not getting what I want. I'm going to lose something I think I got, or what am I going to do when you find out what I did, right? I got to take a shortcut, and there's no way to take a shortcut without stepping on other people's toes. And the book says that when we step on their toes, they retaliate and cause pain and suffering in our life. And the first thought that comes to my mind is, how could you do that to me after all I've done for you? I completely disregard anything, my part in it at all. And I immediately think, how could you do that to me? Right? I don't know if you guys suffer from that too, but there's no way to take a shortcut and not step on people's toes. Okay? So he says, so our troubles, we think, are basically of our own making. Sure they are. They arise out of ourselves, and the alcoholic is an extreme example of self-will run riot, though he usually doesn't think so. Above everything, we alcoholics must be rid of this selfishness. We must, or it kills us. Those are harsh words. If we don't get rid of the selfishness, it's going to kill us. And what happens? Who takes care? God makes that possible. And there often seems no way of entirely getting rid of self without his aid. And then at the bottom of that paragraph, neither could we reduce our self-centeredness much by wishing or trying on our own power. We had to have God's help. This is the how and why of it. First of all, we had to quit playing God. Why do we have to quit playing God? Huh?
Doesn't work.
Look what it says next. It doesn't work. We had to quit playing God. It don't work. It don't work. Next, we decided that hereafter in this drama of life, God was going to be our director. Now, what does that mean? What are we saying here? What we're saying here is that we're going to allow God to direct our lives. This is the kind of deal that we're making. We're going to allow God to direct our lives. Okay? And he reinforces this in the rest of this paragraph. So he says, God was going to be our director. He is the principal. We are his agents. Now, I always use, as an example for this, I always use Al Pacino. Al Pacino's from the Bronx. Years and years ago, him and I drank together and partied together before he was famous. Last time I saw him, he just finished making Dog Day Afternoon, and we got loaded and did a bunch of blow. He didn't have to act much for Scarface, I can tell you that. But I always use Al because most everybody knows him, right? So Al Pacino is an actor, and he has an agent. Now, because Al Pacino is such a big time actor, when his agent goes out, he doesn't go out and represent himself as he wants to be. He goes out and represents himself as Pacino would have him be. Because Pacino is the principal and he's the agent. So he represents himself as Pacino would have him be. Does that make sense to you? Well, that's what we're talking about here with God. God was going to be our director. He is the principal. We are his agent. So if I'm the agent of God, then I need to run out and I need to represent myself as God would have me be rather than I would have myself be. You follow me? That's the idea here. It's not impossible, but it's not easy. Once we learn how to change our behavior, and which these steps are going to help us do, we can do that. We can represent ourselves as God would have us be rather than we would have ourselves be. That's the idea. That's the goal that we're trying to shoot for here. That we're going to allow God to be the director. We're going to let God direct our lives, and we're going to go out and he's the principal. I'm his agent, so I have to represent myself as God would have me be. And then lastly, he gives an easy example. He is the father, and we are his children. Now, I know what that means because when I was a little kid, I didn't go to bed at night hungry. I didn't worry about, am I going to have something to wear tomorrow? None of these things ever crossed my mind because my father provided what I needed. Now, I understand that some people didn't have that experience growing up, but you can think about the concept of it. The concept of it is not hard to think of. Especially now, if you become a parent, you try to do better than your parents did, right? So the idea that my father's going to provide what I need is a simple concept. In fact, most good ideas are simple. And this concept was the keystone of the new and triumphant arch through which we pass to freedom. So the idea I'm going to allow God to direct my life and that I'm going to represent myself as God would have me be, and that I'm going to trust that he's the father and he's going to provide what his child needs, me. Does that make sense to you? Mm-hmm. Okay. I'm sorry? That he's the father and he's going to provide what I need? Is that what I said? Okay. I'm still trying not to think about Scotland, okay? Joe. Yes.
Break it down. Obviously, we can't sit and wait for a sign from God or, a letter in the mail from God that says, here's what you're gonna do. So in practical terms, how would you say people,
Oh, it's easy. It's very easy how to live this way. You don't need to get a thunderbolt, you know, riding in the clouds from God. Danny, you don't need that. Well, you early on in this study, I gave you three things to do that I told you is good for a newcomer, and it's something I still use today in my life. The three things to do: talk about it, write about it, pray about it. That's one way. Got a sponsor, right? Talk to your sponsor. You got all these people in the rooms. Somebody in the rooms have going through or have been through what you're going through. Utilize the tools, the simple kit of spiritual tools laid at your feet. Get up in the morning, get yourself straight with God, and get moving. And, stop doing what you know is wrong and practice right as you understand it. That's a good way to begin.
do the next right thing and see what develops?
Do the next right thing if you can. And try not to hurt people along the way. So that's the important part, right? So if you do all those things and you study this program and you practice this stuff in your life, you're changing. Okay? So it is not difficult to come in. The book tells us that. I think we did in the second step where it says that God doesn't make hard terms for people that seek Him. If you ask God for awareness, you know what you're going to get? You're going to get awareness. So, yeah. So the third step is about understanding that while we make decisions, we don't make decisions about the action, the results. Okay? We just make decisions. The best thing we can do is and this is what the third step is. This is the totality of step 3 is learning how to get out of the result business by turning your thoughts and your actions over to the care of God. You leave the results to the care of God, right? I check my motives. I do the best that I can, and the results are none of my damn business. Now, I'm going to tell you something. If anybody in this room tonight can do that, starting now, if you can start doing that, your life is going to change quickly. Your spirituality is going to soar, and you're going to start getting things and feelings that you never had before. I promise you that, because that's a result of getting out of the result business. It is. Right? So I lived in that space probably 95% of the time today. It's just that damn 5% of the time that gets me. But that's the truth, though. Is if we could, what we're talking about in step 3 is getting out of the result business. And if we can get there, man, there's so much promise and hope for anybody. I don't care how you could be sober 30, 40 years. There's so much promise and hope for you that you haven't had before. Because what you're doing is you're actually applying this third step in your life. Because again, it doesn't matter how long you've been sober. How many times has self-will sabotaged your life? How many times has your life been sabotaged by people, places, and things? Pomp and circumstance, the book says, right? Look what I wrote on here today. Detachment is not that you should own nothing, but that nothing should own you. It's another good place to live. Okay? Freedom. If you get here, you get free. If you get out of result business, you get free. And once you get free, you're able to soar in this fellowship. So any effort to know God's will is aided by being open to it, right? We have to be open to God's will. And when we allow self-will to run riot, we're not open to God's will. We insist on having our way. It's difficult to determine God's will, especially when we're certain that we're correct with what we want. What I want is right. It's correct, right? No. That is definitely. So since we're talking about self-will, there are two wills. There's self-will and God's will. Those are the two wills that exist. Okay? So if you're exercising self-will, you're obviously not in God's will. If you're exercising God's will, you're not in self-will. Okay? And how do you know that? Same thing with what Joe was talking about. You know that by doing those same things that was answered your question. We'll tell you if. And later on, when we get later in the steps, I'm going to show you a check mark that you can always look and see where you're lacking with any step. It's right here in this book. But all right, so where am I? Okay. So the top of page 63. And one of the other things is that it seems that we make decisions not to turn our will and our lives over just as much or more than we make decisions to turn our will and our lives over. All right? Because we insist on the illusion of control. Right? Control is just an illusion. That's all it is. There's nothing in step 3 that relieves me of the responsibility of taking action. That's a misnomer of this program. I'm going to say that again. There's nothing in step 3 that relieves me of the responsibility of taking action. In fact, quite the opposite. Third step is quite the opposite of that. There's some of you people that have been around a long time, you'll remember in the third edition of the book, there was a story, Dr. Alcoholic Addict. Remember that? That was Dr. Paul. Was the guy who wrote that. I think it's still in the fourth edition, but they renamed it. I don't know what it's called now. But oh, is that what they renamed it? Yeah. So, well, he was a funny guy. I met him. He did a convention in New York when I was in my first year of sobriety, and I met him, and he talked about that he made a deal with God. He actually wrote up and signed a contract with God, and I'm trying to remember how he put it, but he talked about in this contract he wrote down that God, from now on, I'm going to check my motives. I'm going to do all the work that I'm supposed to do. I'm going to do everything, and your job is to worry. I'm going to leave the worrying to you because the results are no longer my business. And he signed his name to it, and he shared that from the podium. I'll never forget that because that's pretty spot on, right? Because that's what we do here. That's what we're supposed to do here, right? I do the work. Let God worry. If I checked my motives and I did the best I can, there's nothing for me to worry about because I'm not worried about the results. I'm out of the result business. The results are none of my damn business. That's a lot easier said than done, but you can get there. Trust me, you can get there. Okay, page 63, top of the page. One of the biggest mistakes in the fellowship is people call this the third step promises. These are not the third step promises. How do I know they're not the third step promises? The next paragraph on page 63 says we were now at step 3. Well, you don't get a promise from something you haven't done yet. Don't work like that. So what are these here on the top of page 63? There are 10 results of the second step. Let's go through them so you could mark them in your book. So we had a new employer being all powerful. That's number 1. He provided what he needed if we kept close to him and performed his work well. That is number 2. Established on such a footing, we became less and less interested in ourselves, our little plans and designs. That's 3. Number 4, more and more we became interested in seeing what we could contribute to life. Number 5, as we felt new power flow in. Number 6, as we enjoyed peace of mind. Number 7, as we discovered we could face life successfully. As we became conscious of His presence, that's number 8. We began to lose our fear of today, tomorrow, or the hereafter. That's number 9. And number 10, we were reborn. Now, those 10 results of the second step. So when we're back on page 60, when it says we're at step 3, and then it says the first requirement is that we be convinced that any life run on self-will could hardly be a success. And I asked why is it there twice? Well, the first time is it's just telling us that's where we're at. Now we got work to do. And so we got to look at where self-will, for the next 2 pages, it talks about self-will in our life. And we got to work on our self-will, right? And now, by the time we get to the top of page 63, those 10 results of the second step, if you answer positive to each one of those, if you could say, we had a new employer that being all powerful, yes, I have that. Right here, right now, I feel that. He provided what we needed if we kept close to him and performed his work well. Yes, I have that. Established on such a footing, we became less and less interested in ourselves, our little plans and designs. Yeah, I got that. So if you can answer yes to every one of these 10 things, guess what? You're now at step 3. If you answer no to one of them, you are not at step 3. It's like Monopoly. Go directly to jail. Do not pass go, or back up. Whatever one of those games, you can back up. You got to back up.
Sorry.
Okay. So if you have a negative answer to any of those 10, you're not at step 3. Go back, talk with your sponsor, work on that a little more. When you can answer positive to all 10 of those results, you're now at step 3. Another misunderstanding is that this wonderful prayer, how many times have you been in a meeting and somebody said, oh, it was so spiritual. I went with my sponsor. We knelt down and we did the third step prayer, did the third step, and it was a very spiritual thing. The third step prayer, people, is not the third step. It's just a prayer. It's just a prayer. How do you know it's not the third step? Well, look at the paragraph after that. It says, we found it very desirable to take this spiritual step with an understanding person such as a wife, best friend, or spiritual advisor. But it's better to meet God alone than with one who might understand. The wording was, of course, quite optional. Right there's your answer. The wording was, he's talking about the third step prayer. The wording was, of course, quite optional. People, we do not have optional steps. So if the prayer is optional, it can't be the step. So where is the third step? The third step is in work that you do looking at self-will and understanding the decision that you're making to keep going with these steps and to understand how my thinking, past, present, and future, and my actions, past, present, and future, are important. And getting out of the result business, right, and doing all of those things, that's the third step. Then you finish it off with a prayer. You could come up with your own prayer. Self-will. It's also the work you do in giving up, getting out of result business. It's also the work that you do in understanding the decision you make and your thinking and your actions. And it's all of those things combined, but it's not the prayer. Let me see if I could find this real quick. Go to page 68. second paragraph? Perhaps there is a better way, we think so. For we are now on a different basis, the basis of trusting and relying upon God. We trust infinite God rather than our finite selves. We're in the world to play the role He assigns. Now, this last part here. Just to the extent that we do as we think He would have us and humbly rely on Him, does He enable us to match calamity with serenity. That, my friends, is the third step result. That is the results of step 3. When you're able to match calamity with serenity, when a whole bunch of shit in your life is going on, and instead of reacting to it, you can respond to it. I don't know if we've talked about, there was a guy, one of the original members in Los Angeles, his name was Norm Alpe. He was a great AA guy. And his talk was all about, he called it seconds and inches. He said life is about seconds and inches. Very, very true. So, because my whole life, anytime there was an issue or a problem, it was right on me and I had to get it off of me. If it was on, I just had to get it off of me. But seconds and inches is learning how to go like this. Oh yeah, I know that. I've been there before. I've seen that. I know what happens if I go with this. So now seconds and inches is allowing me to respond to life rather than react to life. And that is really the difference between being crazy and being spiritual. If you can respond to life, and once you've learned how to get out of the result business, it's much easier to respond to life because you don't have you're not getting hurt or disappointed all the time because the results are none of your damn business. You check your motive, you do the best you can, and the results are none of your business. So you can react differently. You can respond instead of react. Inches and seconds.
So sometimes I get caught up on, well, I can't just let God do all this. Like I need to take some sort of action, and that's where I get like tangled up.
Yeah, because I don't know the God you have in your life, and I might have said this before in here, but the God in my life is such a gentleman. He's never going to interfere in my life where I don't want him to. And it's not about what I say when I get on my knees. It's about what I do. It's my actions, right? Like every time I went in front of a judge, he never sentenced me on what I thought. He always sentenced me on what I did. Damn it, I know. So and life and people in the world doesn't judge you on what you think either, right? They judge you on what you do. So God is not going to interfere if you don't want him to. And your actions is what tells him whether you want him to or not. Does that make sense to you? That's when we get to step 6, we're going to see one of the big mistakes in step 6 is that people read step 6 to think that God removes the defects of characters. Yes, he does. He does. But first you have to be entirely ready. They kind of read right over that and just say God removes it. No, you have to be entirely ready. We'll talk about that when we get to step 6. So what I show God I want or don't want is my actions, in my actions. But I just wanted to read for you on that what the third step promises are that we just read. You're able to match calamity with serenity. So when the shit is on, you're able to match it with calmness.
Danny, on 63,
Uh-huh.
after the prayer, third step prayer, I must have made this up. I thought you taught me this, but at the very last sentence, it says that we could at last abandon.
Yeah, well, I was just going to talk about that now, but go ahead. What's your question now?
I make stuff up sometimes. So I wasn't sure.
No, that's where I was just going back to. I'm open right to it. Back on page 63, at the end of that second paragraph where the third step prayer is. We don't need to read the third step prayer because, again, the wording, of course, is optional. But it says what Joe just pointed out. We thought well before taking this step, making sure we were ready, that we could at last abandon ourselves utterly to Him. Those are strong words. Those are not light. That's not light rhetoric. Those are strong words. First is telling us to think before we take this step. You remember, did we go over the original manuscript? Okay. Sorry. I'm having a fucking Scotland flashback again. Okay. I have, huh? I'm gonna read it now. I'm gonna read it. My book has, my book is a study book. The second half of my book is the original manuscript. So, in how it works in the original manuscript. Now, the original manuscript was not the first printing. It's what Bill wrote, and then before they voted on what it should be. But it's important that we study this because we understand what Bill's intent was for us. And so, on how it works, it has the ABCs, just like we have here. And right after the ABCs, the step 1 and step 2, it says this that's not in our book. They took this sentence out because there was a big fight over this. They told Bill it was too harsh. We're going to lose people. And Bill said, all right, you write the damn book. And he quit. No, Bill, we want you to keep writing. But yeah, and he agreed finally agreed to take this sentence out. But after that, he leave me alone. And after this, in the rest of the book, he uses the word must like 100 times, where only saw it like 5 times before that, right? But the ABCs, and then it says this. So ABCs, don't forget, step 1 and step 2, right? A is step 1, step B is step 2, C is step 2. Then it said, if you are not convinced on these vital issues, you ought to reread the book to this point or else throw it away. Exclamation point. And you can always get a copy. You can probably go home and pull up a copy online of the original manuscript, and you can read that. So Bill was telling you, if you don't understand 1 and 2, don't even bother with step 3 because you're going to get drunk. Just throw the book away. So it's important that we understand the intent that Bill had when he was writing this for us, even though they made him take that out, right? And instead, it says, being convinced we're at step 3, which is that we decided to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood Him. Just what do we mean by that, and what do we have to do? So, I think that's a very powerful. I'm sorry, I got to sneeze. I think it's very powerful saying that they made him take out. If you're not convinced to these points, you ought to reread the book on these 2 points, or else throw it away. So Bill's telling you, Bill's message to us was not to go on to step 3, unless you have a good foundation in 1 and 2. If you understand 1, you understand the disease concept, you understand powerlessness, you understand the unmanageability, and hopefully the exercise that we did in here helped you with that. And then step 2 is your idea of God and the fake it till you make it prayer. I hope those things give you a good enough foundation that you can go on to the 3rd step. But if not, just think of all the people in the rooms that come into the rooms, they get a sponsor, they don't do shit for step 1 except for, are you powerless? Yeah. Your life unmanageable? Oh, yeah. Okay. You believe in God? I'm not sure. You willing to believe in God? I don't know. You believe I believe in God? I guess so. Okay. And next thing you know, they're right in the 4th step. There was people when we started this study in this room with this study that were doing that went through that, just went through that. not here no more, but it's okay. Hopefully they caught the message and they changed that because it happens every day. Every day people get that. And Bill's telling you, you shouldn't be on the third step. You should understand 1 and 2.
That was exactly my experience 21 years.
Yeah. So that's why over here, back on page 63, says, we thought well before taking this step, making sure we were ready. And then he says that we could at last abandon ourselves not to him, utterly to him. Well, what is the difference of throwing that word utterly in there? It changes the whole concept of the sentence. It completely changes the concept of the sentence. I'm going to read it to you without that word in there. And then I'll read it to you with that one. We thought well before taking this step, making sure we were ready, that we could at last abandon ourselves to him. That means one thing, right? We thought well before taking this step, making sure we were ready, that we could at last abandon ourselves utterly to him. That's a whole different meaning. That's a completely different meaning. Utterly. Without any hesitation, without any doubt, without any interference or anything else, without any mental bullshit going on, utterly abandon myself to God. Think well before you do this, because again, if you're not ready, now, if you've done a good first step and you've done a good second step, you should be in a position that you are ready to utterly abandon yourself to God. If not, you're probably in a position where you can abandon yourself to God. So I will give you an example. When I was a little kid, you've probably seen movies in back in the 50s and 60s. They had the greasers, and we called them greasers. They had the hair slicked back, and they stood on the corner and they had a 55-gallon drum there on fire, keeping warm and drinking some booze and stuff. Well, those were the guys in my neighborhood. My brother, I had 2 older brothers. My brother was one of the leaders of that gang, and they used to mess with me all the time. And if I was walking down the street, down the sidewalk, and I saw them, they'd grab me. They'd throw me down, and we used to call it a pink belly. They'd pick your shirt up and they start slapping your belly until you give up, right? The magic word was uncle. I don't know why that's the magic word, but if you say uncle, then they stop and let you go. And they kick you in the butt and send you away, I'm 10, 11 years old. These guys are 17, 18 years old, They're all the tough guys in the neighborhood. But I learned real quick that when they grabbed me and they threw me down, as soon as they lift my I start, uncle, uncle, uncle. But I didn't mean it. They'd let me up. I try to kick one of them in the nuts and run away. Because I didn't mean it. And when I come in here and I talk to God, if I abandon myself to God, I really don't mean it. But if I utterly abandon myself to God, that's a different story. I mean, so, I hope that makes sense to you. Utterly. All right. Okay. Now, I want to ask, does anybody in here have the ability to make copies of sheets? Enough for everybody. Like 50 copies of 4 sheets? So that would be like 200 copies, 200 pages? You do? Okay. Uh, if you give me your email, I'm going to email you 4 step sheets that we'll use in here. Yeah. Be great. Thank you. Did I mention it's a donation?
Difference between page 60 and 63. I think you did explain it then, but it says being convinced we were at step 3, and then it says we were now at step 3, and I forgot your explanation.
Yeah, on page 60, It's being convinced of step one and step two, the three pertinent ideas, right? So if you're convinced of A, B, and C, you're now at you were at step three. But you really didn't do anything. You're just at step three. So, in other words, let's say when you leave here, you're going to drive to Norman, right? So you sit there and you say, hey, I'm driving to Norman later. But you're here. You didn't go nowhere yet, right? But you're ready to drive to Norman. So if you are convinced on the first two steps, you're ready to step three. By the time you get to page 63, you've looked at your self-will, you've looked at all these other things, and it says we're now at step three. So if you can answer yes to all of those 10 things on the top of page 63, you're now at step three. Huh? You're in the car driving to Norman. Yes. Okay. Anybody else got a question? Nobody's got a question?
Stillwater next time?
Oh, God.
What?
Stillwater as your example. Go to Stillwater.
You said Stillwater. I'm thinking of God and holy water or something. What's he trying to say? Okay. And come on, we got 2 or 3 minutes left. Who's got a question? Yes.
Question. I heard you say that the prayer is not step three, but I find that to me, there's so much power in that prayer when you say it meaningfully with intent. I guess, I know for me, it makes me.
That's a really good question. Did everybody hear what he said?
No.
He said that because I said that the prayer is not the third step, but it's powerful to him. And yeah, so I apologize because I wasn't trying to diminish the power of the prayer. I was trying to separate it from, because a lot of people think that that's the step. They get on their knees with their sponsor, they say the prayer, they get up, they tell everybody they did the third step. No, they didn't. They just said a prayer on their knees with their sponsor. That's all they did. So it is a very powerful prayer, especially if you say it wholeheartedly. Absolutely. I don't mean to diminish that in any respect. I just want you to understand that's not the third step. Does that make sense?
It's accessory to the third step.
Yes, it is. Because it's telling you that if you don't want to use those words, use your own. But it's telling you need to say some type of prayer, to acknowledge what you've done. And I kind of I like that prayer, but I don't use it as the third step. I use it as, after the work is done.
I use it all the time ever since I heard it. I will not leave my house, being on my knees. And what it seems like to me, yeah, it's fabulous. You kind of unfold over the years on what's going on in that prayer. But it's a reminder or a kicker for me
Yeah.
to remember who's in charge.
Oh, yeah.
And who's the
Yeah, absolutely.
The book about what God's will would be.
God's will for us? Yeah.
Me, I found out just it for a while that God's will for me is the best possible outcome for everybody involved. It's how I see it.
Well, the book is it's more explicit than that. It's more explicit than that. The book is real. It says God's will for us is to be happy, joyous, and free. That's God's will for us. That's what the book says. All right. Anybody else, real quick? If I don't have these glasses on, I can't see you people there. These are my reading glasses. Okay. Well, we'll see you then next week. Same time, same channel. Thank you.